Hi Kyle, here we are. We're here today to do, I believe, a framing and roughing inspection of this house.
Yeah.
So this is one of our bigger inspections, more time consuming, a lot of complicated parts. So
it looks like we've got some specs here for some beams. We've got the truss specs, and we have specs for here for a tall wall. Perfect.
So by the looks of things, they're probably all needed items in this particular house.
Yeah.
So kind of the first thing I'm noticing already is there's kind of a little veranda or extended roof over the entryway here.
Yeah, so we've got some floor joists here, as well as a 2-ply lintel holding up the story above there, that exterior wall. So we would have a spec here for that.
So it looks like from this point of view already, like you say, we have a couple engineered products in place here, along with some dimensional structural products. So this here is our dimensional stuff that's covered by the code. And then over here, we have a couple what we call LVL sandwiched together. So they're an engineered product, right? So each one's doing a little different job. And besides that, we have an wooden floor joist.
Yeah, and if you notice here, Pat, on the outside end of these joists, it looks like they weren't able to get their 1.5-inch bearing on there, so they've added some hangers there.
Perfect, that are suitable for that application.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And this, I know it looks crooked, but this is just temporary. So eventually they're going to put a 6x6 column in here that's going to go up and catch this corner.
Yeah.
So this is just a note of incomplete work, so we'll make sure we put that on the report that there's a column missing on the front porch.
I guess too, Pat, while we're here, we could maybe touch on flashings.
Yeah, good call.
So some areas they look for these flashings, and some of them don't include this in the framing and stage. But what we're typically looking for here is flashings installed as to the manufacturer's specifications for the window or door.
Yeah, and typically what you would see is some type of flashing tape, not tuck tape or blue or red tape, but some type of flashing tape that's usually on the 3 sides, correct?
That's right, yeah. So you'll see it up the 2 sides, a piece across the top, typically under the tie bar.
Right.
And then the bottom will have what's called a sill pan flashing, which we'll probably see a little bit better inside.
Yeah.
But you can see it here. It comes out over the sill and down over the wall.
Right, and generally do we see that sometimes on the side too, this type of stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
sometimes
usually it'll run up at least that far, a foot?
Yeah, it's usually somewhere between 8 and 12 inches.
Right on. And the big trick, I think, typically we wouldn't see any more flashing tape on the bottom because we want whatever moisture does get in there to come out.
That's right, exactly.
All right, perfect. We'll take a quick look at the back side. So now we can notice how big this house is because it's on a sloping site, eh?
Yeah.
So it looks like 2 stories on the front, but technically it's a 3-story building.
Yep.
Right. So you can tell now, you mentioned earlier, Kyle, about some tall walls. You can see some of the height maybe where the tall walls are going to be applicable.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see that a little bit better on the inside there, but right here you can also see too where the siding is broken here. That's where a ledger board will be for a deck out here.
A future deck, right?
A future deck.
Yeah. So that's a good point. We should again put a note on there that the deck is not installed at the time of framing inspection.
Yeah.
Right. And so it'll be looked after probably at the final.
Yes, exactly.
Again, you can see their flashing detail at least at the bottom of the doors, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the flashing there for the ledger board coming out over it to keep it from getting water in behind.
Right on. Again, another spot for propane. So from this perspective, there's not much else to see. We do see a lot of the hoods put out so far too for ventilation.
Yes. Yep. Hoods and it's a good opportunity to look at the file and see, make sure that window placement for limiting distance and for fire protection is the same as what had been planned.
Yeah, we don't have to worry so much about this site again, because
Yeah.
this house, there's lots of room between it and the neighbors. So it's not applicable, but it was approved for a certain amount of openings.
That's
So we'll compare that with the plans and make sure at this point that no extra windows or doors went in that would affect that. Well, that's our quick walk around the outside, Kyle. Let's step in and see what we find in here. So where would you like to start?
Well, we should probably go to the top floor. We can look at the trusses there, make sure
Okay.
that everything is good there. And that way we can follow our point loads and everything down through the floors.
Yeah. So generally when we get on site, the contractor stuff, and here they are, supposed to have our truss drawings on site, so we have something to compare them for. So usually they leave them in a conspicuous place for us to find them. That's a big word, conspicuous. I'm going to use that again. But anyway, yeah, most of the times they are here, but sometimes they're not. They'll send them to us digitally and we can look them at that. But I
Yep.
much prefer them in paper form. Pretty hard to flip through them on your phone
Yeah, exactly.
or your tablet,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll take these with us.
Okay.
Hopefully all the other engineer specs are in this envelope as well. So we're noticing just here before we go upstairs that there's a lot of pre-engineered products here.
Yeah.
Floor, LVL beams, steel beams, right? And then finally the roof trusses. And potentially, there it is right there, it's all lit up in the yellows like they highlighted it for us. All right, so that's what we call our tall wall. So all these items have been engineered
Yeah.
some shape or form. So this one's a little bit more complicated than most, but we'll sift through the paperwork and make sure it matches up.
Sounds good.
All right, let's go upstairs. So the kind of thing I'm noticing right off the bat, Kyle, is more of a safety issue than a code issue. But they're supposed to have some type of temporary barrier here or guard, just so not only you and I don't fall off, but the workers here don't fall off, right? So
Yeah,
they,
for sure.
they need to do something similar to this. This one's not the best in the world, so it needs a little shoring up. If I were to lean on that, I'd be going over. So we'll just stick to the inside here. Yeah, so the thing I like about up here, Kyle, or the whole place, is it's pretty neat and tidy, eh?
Yeah,
So it makes the
it
site
is.
a lot safer. It makes it a lot easier to do our job too, right? We can see what we're looking at.
Yeah, considering we're looking up a lot of the time, we don't want to be tripping over things that are on the ground.
Right on. So, and that's why it's important to have these temporary railings too, because we're like this and don't know where we're going, over we go.
Yeah.
So, all right, where do you want to start looking at first?
All right, well, maybe we'll start by pulling out the truss drawings there. Hopefully they included a layout.
And what's the point of having these drawings?
So the point of having these drawings is these are a pre-manufactured system. So included in that system, there are specifications on.
Let me hold your tablet.
Sure.
Good luck there, buddy.
All right. Perfect. So yeah, there's specifications in here for bracing in these trusses. So we'll look through these, make sure that we'll verify which ones need bracing, and then we'll go through and make sure that they're in place.
Yeah, so there's some extra things that need to be put into the braces or the trusses, potentially, that it only can be done on site. So these little drawings will tell us what additional things, if any, that we have to do to them.
Exactly,
On site.
and they'll be noted on the drawing here.
Yeah. And they'll include, and I'm not seeing anything this way, so I don't know if the drawings are showing anything, Kyle, but I don't see any lateral bracing right offhand in this section.
Not seeing any on the drawings here.
And I don't see any T-bracing on the ends, or scab bracing. That would be on the gable truss ends. So is there any showing up in the...
Nope, there's no bracing that I can see on the plans here, Pat. So just some hangers that we need to look for on a couple of trusses, and that's it.
Okay, 'cause I'm just taking a look through and I actually don't see any installed either on site, so. we'll say they're good to go until
All right.
otherwise noted. So that's just to do with the bracing for the trusses,
That's right.
right? So this type of roof, usually it indicates a lot of, and here they are over here, like girder trusses,
Exactly.
right?
So there'll be a specification in here for the girder truss, and it'll tell you how many plies that girder truss needs to be, and the nailing pattern on it.
Right on. So here they are right here. You can see 3 of them put together, what we call a girder truss. And you can see that it bears on that end over there. And it comes all the way across over here. It bears on this end. And what particularly we want to know is about that, so that's a 3-ply girder truss. Typically, we need at least 3 plies of studs right underneath them to carry them. 1 stud per ply. And that should be continuous all the way down to the foundation.
Yeah, so that's a good reason to start on the first floor so that we can note that
And
further
follow it down, right?
Follow it down.
Yep. That way we'll save us a couple trips up and down the stairs.
That's right.
Hopefully. So we'll make note of that area, and you can tell how much weight this is actually carrying. So this is actually carrying half this roof. Half of this entire roof. So it's pretty substantial. And then they reverse the trusses this way, so this turns into the load-bearing wall.
Yeah, so here it is here. 3-ply, and then it will give the nailing pattern down here.
Right on. And if there's any bracing required on the girder truss, sometimes they'll show some scab bracing on the top.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I don't see any installed here either, so none showing on the drawing.
None showing on the drawing.
All right. So that's kind of the roof part. Now we're going to start looking, I guess, the next level down, as I say.
Yeah, so we can start looking at the wall framing. As you mentioned, we're looking for point loads underneath girder trusses, making sure that there's a proper amount of plies in there. And we're also looking at window openings, window and door openings.
Yep. So the main thing to remember about window openings with the load-bearing wall is what we call a jack stud, and we have a king stud. So the king stud goes all the way from plate to plate. The jack stud usually comes and has to touch the lintel. And, and the lintels are sized based on number of stories above them. In this case, it's just a roof. And they're also sized on the length of the opening.
The span of the opening, yep.
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 So this one's plenty big. And it has to be at least a 2-ply.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the other thing we're looking at on the framing up here, one of the things we should be looking at is the top plate, although you can have a single, typically you find 2, and they have to be crossed in the corner, overlap one another, like a lap joint.
Exactly. And further to that, whenever you have a joint in that 2-ply top plate, they need to lap over a stud.
Right on, like right here.
Exactly.
Yep. So this point right here, right, this joint on the top plate comes over a stud. And the good framers will frame everything from one side to the other, so it's uniform all the way down. So if they're doing 16-inch centers, they'll start on one side and go that way, and everything will be done from that way. Yep. Whether it's 16 inches, 12 inches, 24 inches on center, it's always done, or should be done, from the same side over. Good, so these studs are actually spaced at 16-inch centers. One of the other requirements we look at is this little stamp right here. So there is a requirement for structural lumber to be stamped and graded. And what that tells us is it gives it a certain amount of strength, right? We got number 1s, 2, 3s. So the lower the number, the less structural stability it has. But they are acceptable at usually around here, number 2, spruce, pine, and fir. All right, so let's keep looking at the frame. And the other thing I think we need to keep in mind for framing is you'll see a lot of stuff is serviced through. Some ductwork, we'll probably find some more plumbing pipes.
Yeah, right? That's a good point, making sure that, things that are not supposed to be cut are not cut.
Right. Sometimes the plumbers and ventilation people get a little saw happy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if something's in the way, they'll just cut it out. Now, most of the times they're non-load bearing walls, it's not a big issue. But one of the things that we do kind of find is, especially with the plumbing penetrations this way, is if this here is an 1.25 inches of the surface of the stud, it should have a metal protector plate over it so someone doesn't put a screw or nail in it.
Yep.
So that's one of the things we find quite often, right? Especially if it's a wire or water supply line, right?
So in the case of when you get on site and somebody has cut something off that they shouldn't have, or have drilled through something they shouldn't have, what's the process for getting it fixed?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So if it's an engineered product, then the fix for that, if they weren't supposed to notch it, drill it, or cut it, would come from the manufacturer or an engineer to say, yeah, if you do this, this, and this, it'll reinstate the structural integrity. If it's dimensional lumber, it usually you can just replace that piece, right? Or add on to it to make the thickness back to where it should be. So them are typically the fixes.
And we get that as a drawing, very much the same as we do.
We would get
truss
something
drawings.
confirmation from the manufacturer. This is how we're going to fix the situation. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen.
It does happen, yeah.
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 Hey Kyle, is there anything else that you think we need to look at the framing stage?
So yeah, absolutely. We need to look at the adaptable housing requirements.
And what are they per se?
So essentially what they are is they are requirements for keeping people in their houses longer as they age. So there's certain requirements around adding in blocking in bathrooms for potential future grab bars, the heights of switches and plumbing rough-ins, that sort of thing. So
Right.
that's all something we should definitely look at this stage.
Yeah, so it's a perfect time to look at that, right?
Yeah.
Same reason sometimes we'll just double check for egress windows because it's a lot easier at the framing stage to change that or add that or readjust something.
Exactly.
As opposed to once the drywall or insulation, everything's in. So one of the things we look at adaptable housing is the doorway width. So every habitable room has to have a minimum width of 36 inches to get in, correct?
That's correct.
And once we're in the room, all these controls for light switches and for duplexes, for where you plug something in, typically the majority of them, unless it's going to be something that's going to stay plugged in, have to be between 16 and 47 3/4 off the finished floor.
That's right.
So you can tell that these are at a good height, right? So if somebody were in a wheelchair, they can reach them. That's the whole point.
Yep.
And to your point, Kyle, if we come around, let me see. So we know we got a washroom here, and this is actually going to be the water closet, or the toilet as you will, and you can see that they've already installed their blocking in case they have to put a future grab bar on.
And I guess that goes back to our earlier point about cutting things off.
Yeah,
Because
so-
some of the areas here you can see where they put the blocking in, the plumbers
Just cut
cut
them
it
out.
off.
Yeah, so they're gonna have to put something back in there, right? Same as here. They'll have to do that there. They did the same thing here. They just cut it off because it was in their way. So we'll make a note of that on the report too.
Yeah.
And this one's for a shower, and you can tell they put the blocking in for a grab bar for the shower.
Yeah, looks good.
Another thing that looks a little funny is this window.
Yeah. Kind of hard to open it, isn't it?
Yeah, that way it is. Why do you think the window's like that for?
So it's not because they installed it backwards.
No,
It's
no.
there because when the drywallers or when the drywall truck shows up, as
Like
it is right
it is now? Backing in? Yeah.
Backing in the driveway as we speak.
Yeah.
They will pop this window out and they'll boom that drywall up to this window and pull it in through that window.
A lot easier than carrying it all up the stairs.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah. Then they'll put the window the right way.
Then they'll put it in the right way,
Yeah.
flash it properly, and finish the siding.
Because also at this stage, and why this came to our attention is not so much for this room because it looks like a washroom and vanity room, right? But if
Yeah.
this were a bedroom, we'd want to check the size of the egress window.
That's right.
Yeah. And if it's wrong, now's the time to get it switched.
That's correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So Pat, this is a framing and rough-in plumbing inspection.
Yep.
So since we're here on the top floor, we might as well look at the rough-in plumbing for this floor.
Yeah, so we're going to look at all this black ABS pipe.
Yep.
And basically we're going to look at this shiny ductwork that's up above the roof line or ceiling line here.
Yeah.
Right? So basically what we're looking for here is to make sure there's at least, well, for instance, this one is an exhaust, supplemental exhaust, right? So it should
Yeah.
go all the way out. It's a long way around, but it goes.
Yep.
This other line should be right here. So this is the exhaust for this bathroom that's connected to the HRV unit,
That's right.
right? So this is going to suck out
Yep.
air.
So when the machine is installed at the final, for the final, the rooms, typically the bathrooms and the kitchen area have the exhaust,
Correct.
and the remainder of the rooms in the house
Yeah.
have the fresh air coming in.
So we should be looking for, at the very least, one port in each room, typically.
Yes.
Be it exhaust or supply. And I don't see one in here, do you?
Not in this room, I don't.
Nope. Now we don't do little closets and whatnot. We don't care too much about them. But this room should have one somewhere. So we'll have to make a note of that to see where that is and why there's not one here.
Yeah,
Maybe it's not finished being installed. I don't know.
perhaps. So above us here, Pat, you can see that we've got a bunch of black pipe. They're all running through the ceiling.
Right.
So,
Any issues with that?
so what this is here is because this is an attic space, we're going to assume that this is the venting for the remainder of the plumbing system below.
Yeah, it seems like it comes up from below, goes all the way up here, so it may be servicing something below us, coming all the way up and tying into the main stack, right? The main vent, which this one does go out through the roof.
Yes.
And you can see that they have a lot of little blocks here about every 4 feet. So that's required so that pipe is supported. If that pipe wasn't supported like that, after time, because it gets hot in the summertime up there, that pipe may actually bend, fill with water if it bends more than 1.5 inches, and it will no longer vent. It'll be plugged with water.
Exactly. It'll act as a trap.
Yep. And then in the winter time, it's going to freeze and break. And then you're going to have a big mess on your ceiling here. And we see that repeated a couple times where it's supported right up here this way. So
Yeah, and we can follow these lines and make sure, as you follow these lines around, you can make sure that everything, all the fixture units in this space have the proper venting, and that they're vented to the main stack and out through the roof.
Yeah. And you can see where this wall was a little bit thin, they furred it out a bit. You see that?
Yeah.
So they can get their plumbing stack in where they need it to.
Yeah.
The other thing I still notice is, we'll mention it too, that they need to be protected with metal protector plates.
Yes.
We don't want to be putting holes in them. We're also kind of doing a rough-in plumbing at the same time. So we're looking at kind of the fittings for the plumbing.
Yes.
Right? And some of where the fixtures are going. So there's a code requirement that be at least 4 inches away. Right? That
Yep.
trap, which this one's fine.
Yep.
And that this be 2 inches.
That's right.
Yeah. For this is going to be a clothes washer.
Yep.
Yeah. So they want something a little bigger than that 1.5 inches.
Yeah. So for, like you said, like a clothes washer, you have the 2 inch, whereas for a sink, you'll typically have 1.5 inches, but it
Correct.
again depends on how many fixtures are on that line,
Right.
and whether it's a wet vent, which is something altogether different
Yeah.
again.
And you can see the plumbing over here. We have a double sink. So they have a T fitting. We have a sink here and a sink there, and then this goes up and vents and ties into the venting system.
That's right.
Right. So the fittings look appropriate here. Looks like the appropriate glue on them.
That's another good point, Pat,
Yeah.
is to make sure that they're actually glued together.
Yeah. So you might want to give them a wiggle every now and then. But typically you can see the bit of the yellow on the ABS anyway. The vent is not that big of a deal because it's supposed to be just air, but it does get moisture from steam and whatnot.
That's right.
Yeah. So. Anything else you think we need to look at?
Not seeing anything in particular at the moment.
Yeah. So one thing that just caught my eye a little bit here is this overhead rainfall shower head. So what they do is they want to keep that pipe on the warm side. So they just kind of elevated the ceiling in that area for the insulation. So the insulation be up above that.
Right.
So the heat will keep that and keep it from freezing. We'll just, so we just checked the egress windows. I already checked that one, and this one. So I can tell they're all crank out. They're all plenty big, so they're going to meet the egress requirement.
Sounds good.
So here's another good thing to look at too, Kyle, at the framing stage is, of course, there's a code requirement for the stair height, or the clear headroom going downstairs. So you want to make sure at the framing stage, this one's got plenty of room. This is why it's kind of slanted like this, that we maintain that head height, which is about 6'4"3/4", right?
Yep.
Clear height. So this is plenty of room. I'm about six feet tall. So I got a good gauge built right in. I just put my hand on my head and I walk down the stairs. My hand hits something, they're in trouble.
I'm not 6 foot tall, so if I'm walking down the stairs and I hit my head, it's definitely wrong.
It's definitely in trouble. Absolutely. But that would be the time if it was lower than that, you know, they could tear it apart at the framing stage, right? And
that's right.
All right, Kyle, we're back on the main level. We came from upstairs. And we're looking now in here, and if you remember upstairs, we had that big girder truss.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Which ran somewhere around this vicinity.
Yeah. So I think if we look over here, Pat, you can see that this is a good possibility that this is where that point load is.
Right on.
We have a set of squash blocks up there in that.
Right on. So they put these in. So the weight of that upstairs doesn't bow that floor, right? So it supports it. And then that keeps transferring down, 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 down. And hopefully where that nail is below, we should find at least 2 or 3 more of them.
That's right.
In that same location.
Yeah.
And on this side, we follow that across. Typically you'll see right there that there's a squash block on this side, and then it transferred down that one. That one's supporting the steel beam there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So again, same as upstairs, we're looking at the window and door openings to make sure that the headers are appropriate size, making sure that the jack studs are appropriate, the king studs, making sure that everything is framed the way it's required to be.
Stamped lumber, right?
Stamped lumber.
Yeah. This type of framing is typically called platform framing.
Yes.
And there is a difference between platform and the other type that they used to do back in the day was balloon framing. So platform framing is basically they build one floor at a time, put the floor on, move up to the next one. Balloon framing is basically continuous studs all the way up, and they hang the floor off of it. So that's the difference, but there's not many people now that do balloon framing.
No.
But you can't buy a tree or get a tree longer than 10 feet now, right? So this is the way they do it. So this one looks pretty good. Again, we're looking at the lentils, right?
Yep.
Sizing of lentils. We do have a special floor system here.
Yeah, so we have a pre-engineered floor system here. So we would have a, same as we had for the trusses. We'd have a spec for that. So we would want to make sure that what we're seeing here is the same as what's in those specifications.
Yeah, so that the floor drawings will spec the size of these, the TGIs, which are the wood floor I-joists, which are these ones. Sometimes you find on the open web ones that look like the sawtooth.
Yep.
They're a bit stronger. And usually it all comes as a system. So they'll spec these LVL beams, they'll spec these hangers.
Yep.
They'll spec if there's any other bridging or blocking that has to go in.
That's right.
Right?
And as you mentioned with the open web floor joists, typically what you'll find in those is they'll require strong backs.
Yeah, they'll have another piece of lumber go down through them.
Exactly, tie everything together,
Yeah.
strengthen.
And then the conventional framing is just 2x10s or 2x12s, right back
Yep.
before all this engineered product came along. The trouble with the regular stuff is you can't span as far as you can with this stuff.
That's right,
So people want bigger, better, more open. This is the stuff they want to use.
exactly.
Yeah.
And typically, where you're going to see notching and drilling that shouldn't be in there will be in these types of floor systems.
Yeah, you're good point, because what will happen is where this is a spec engineered product, if they even drill one hole through that, the potential is to weaken it. Right? If they do that, then we're back to the manufacturer, just like the roof trusses, if they were cut, for some type of fix. Or be okay. Confirm it'd be okay. So another support we got here that we didn't have upstairs is this column here, right? Which is kind of supporting this corner.
Yeah,
And again, we get an engineered product because these are coming over to that. LVL. This is one on the end. So what they want to do, they can't cantilever the corner that far, so they have to have another support. So we'll check on this one when we go down the basement level, see if it keeps going. Right?
all right.
Well, look at this.
Here's our tall wall that we were talking about
Yeah.
outside.
And it looks like someone took a highlighter and said, okay, I want you guys to look at this, and we're going to do it yellow, just so you know it's different.
Yep.
So they all highlighted it for us, right? So what's the deal with this, Kyle? Why all the pretty colors?
So because this wall is higher than 12 feet in height, in stud height, we have what's called a tall wall. So anytime you get over that height, that 12-foot magic number, you need to have an engineer's design for
Right.
that wall. So the highlighted lumber that you're seeing here is all engineered lumber.
Yeah, it
So it's
kind of
designed to do exactly what it's doing.
looks like our LVLs, right?
Yeah,
So it's the same type of material, but they made them stud depth. So if you look at it, the same depth of 2x6. Again, we can't get a 2x6 that long on one piece, so it's an engineered product, right?
that's right.
And the whole idea for that is because such a big wall and there's no floor tying into it, it has a lot of sideways pressure from wind.
Yep.
So the wind blows on that, the wall can move like this. It might not ever fall apart, but it's going to crack the drywall every time.
That's right. So yeah, we would check the specification on that to make sure that the wall was built as per the design.
Yeah, yeah. And we checked that, and this developer is pretty good, so we know that's going to be up to snuff, right? And you can tell it starts there, because again, they highlighted the lumber, and it goes all the way around to here. So Kyle, one of the other engineered products I see here, which probably get missed a lot, are these stair stringers. So there's a structural requirement for these stair stringers, if it was dimensional lumber, to have at least 3.5 inches here of meat, right? And that's again, so structurally whole. This one's really good because it has a wall here, so it's really not even an issue, but except for the center one, right, and the far end one. So these are attached pretty good. The other part again is they need that 1.5 inch bearing, the stairs, and typically that's a good place as any, I guess, to put on them. Again, this one's attached up here, and it's supported by a wall, so these are pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this is an engineered, what they call a rim board. It says right on it, right?
Yep.
So, perfect.
All right, so over here, Pat, we were talking earlier about open web floor joists. Well, we got some right here.
Yeah, there they are, right? You got a good mixture of everything here.
Yeah.
Huh? They got the wooden eye joists, TGIs, and then they got the open web ones here. The only ones I don't see here are just dimensional,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So these are all as per we have a sketch for these, so this is all per the plan, and you'll see typically, this one, although I don't see a strong back through it though, but typically there'd be sometimes call for a strong back to go down through the middle of these.
Yeah, depending on what the span is on that joist, they may ask for 1, 2, or however many are needed to kind of tie it all together.
Right, and all that does is take some of the vibration of the floor.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect.
So it looks like we've got some more point loads over here.
So we got a kind of a little bit of a mixture here. So we got a floor on this side, And we got a small section of roof on this side. And,
Yeah.
then we got an LVL product or pre-engineered product going this way toward the beam. Just because we have a very, very big span. And we're carrying a fairly large load, at least from the floor, not so much from the roof.
Yeah, so in this case, we're carrying a floor, hanging a floor hung off of it. We've got a small roof hung off of it on this side, and then, like you said, carrying the second story above.
And you can see that the electrician drilled a hole in there.
Yeah,
So hopefully that is spec'd. We'll double check it. But they drilled a hole in there. It is 2 inches up, and that's okay in dimensional lumber. Not so sure it's okay in engineered lumber.
that's right. So we'll have to get that. Get
We'll
them to
double
check
check
that
that,
out.
see if that's in the spec. If it's
Yeah.
in the spec and allows certain side of holes, that's good.
So we've got a series of hangers here as well. That this floor system and the roof system is hanging off of that beam.
Right.
So we want to make sure that one, that those hangers are in place, and that two, they're nailed off or structurally screwed off appropriately.
Yeah, so you can't just use regular nails
No,
or deck screws in there.
that's right.
Yeah. It has to be an engineered screw
Yep,
for shear, right? Because the heads break off. If the head breaks off, no longer going to support anything.
that's right.
Yeah. And again, they're supported on the end, right? So they basically got a big column on each end. They come down the floor. So we'll check under the basement again too, see if there's squash blocks there, right? Perfect. Again, we're looking at some of the ventilation here. So you can see that one is a range outlet. We got both electric and propane over here. And you can see that there's a vent out there for the
Yeah,
range
for the
hood.
Range hood, yeah.
We also can see a supply here. So this one here, I've noticed. So we were upstairs and didn't notice the ductwork in the ceiling other than exhaust. So I'm thinking with this one, Kyle, they got a heat pump system furnace with ductwork. Because I see a return over here on the wall. See how that is?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right? So they're probably going to do the ductwork for both heating and ventilation through their coupled system.
Right.
But we'll get that confirmed as well. And we might come more information about that as we go down, because I'm not seeing a lot of ventilation duct run. I'm seeing a lot of heating duct, right? But I'm not seeing a lot of ventilation duct.
Yeah.
Out in the garage here, there's a lot of structural things going on. We kind of briefly talked about that on our way in. So there's a number of things going on here. We got roof, floor, LVL beams, I-joists. We got a lot of plumbing. And we should probably just explain a little bit that these TGIs, these wooden ones, you are allowed to drill holes at a certain distance apart in them.
That's right.
Yeah, for plumbing,
Yep.
4 wires, right?
Yeah,
So-
so what you can, and you can also see here, we've got a steel beam running through the front half of this garage here.
Right.
And then we have an LVL beam over on this end that is carrying the floor joists over here. So that's
Right.
something we should take a little bit closer look at.
Yeah. So this is what we call a point load, right? Most of the stuff in our building code is for distributed live load other than a few columns and stuff like that. So this is the point load because this is one load going this way, and this is carrying all that load, and it hits that point. So that point there is overloaded more than the rest of the beam. So that is definitely what we're going to get from our engineer to make sure or confirm that that's okay. And it was allotted for.
And then of course we've got the point loads coming down or on both sides. The one over there you can see goes down directly to the foundation.
Yeah.
And this one here we'll check when we get
Yeah,
downstairs.
so on the other side of this, hopefully there's squash blocks that go there anyway on the other side of that.
All right, well, I guess we should check out the rough plumbing on this floor.
Yeah, right on. Most of it seems to be right here anyway, right?
Yeah,
So again, we got supported pipe. They're going to insulate this space. So the only concern on this space would be this little trap right here and this trap. Everything else is not going to hold water except for the 2 traps and these supply lines, obviously.
Yep.
Right? So we checked the plan. I don't know if the garage floor is heated or not. I don't know. We'll check the plans and see. Regardless, it still has to have protection there from freezing. But the ABS looks good. Looks like they're appropriate fittings, appropriate glue. It looks supported. Yeah, so you can see, Kyle, there's quite a bit of plumbing in this area. And as we were saying before, you're allowed to notch and drill these I-joists, but the manufacturer will actually spec where you can do that and how big the holes are going to be. Same as the LVLs, right?
Yeah, because in the case of a dimensional lumber, the code allows for certain size holes and in certain locations.
Right.
And it'll specify that in the code.
Right. But the code doesn't have I-joist systems in it, right?
No,
that's a
that's right.
manufacturer pre-engineered thing.
That's
So
right.
we have to check with them
That's right.
or go by their spec.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anything else you notice down here?
No, just looking at the plumbing, making sure that everything is flowing in the right direction. Making sure that there's no 90s in any places that are not supposed to be. Making sure that there's no TYs in places that they're not supposed to be. Sizing of plumbing pipes. We have another attic hatch out here.
Yeah. And why would we have an attic hatch here?
So, because this is a concealed attic space here, there's no other way to get to that attic space. And it fits the requirements for an attic hatch, so there would have to be an attic hatch
So
into that
They
area.
got a certain amount of space above it and floor
That's right.
height and attic height. They need access to it. And this one is not tied to the one we've seen upstairs, so they have an additional one. So Kyle, one of the things we want to take in consideration, a lot of time that's missed, is this little stair landing, or as I like to call it, a little floor. And as such, it still has to meet the requirements of a floor.
That's right,
So
exactly.
you can notice this one has joists, although short, but they still have their joist hangers for their 1.5 bearing, and the floor is supported on the wall, right? So it's good. This one's good.
Yep.
Again, we want to check for,
I'm gonna check the head clearance there to make sure we're good.
and
We've
we
got
are.
lots of space there, so I think we're good.
Yep. So now we're down into the depths of the building. And
Yeah.
as I suspected, which is now confirmed, that we are doing a central heating system, and it's going to be heat pump, which will have an electrical coil for backup, which is considered a heating system. So the ventilation is actually coupled with this system.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is permissible by code.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can see the big plenums that we got up here above us.
Yeah. So that's our return. How do I know? Ask me how I know.
How do you know, Pat?
Because it's written right here. Have you seen that before?
Done this way?
Yeah. So typically this is just shiny cardboard, eh? So it's cold air, so it's not tin like that, so it's not supply. That's generally why. But they were kind enough to write it on there for me. So again, we're going to look over here, Kyle, from the framing side, structural framing side. It might be hard to see because it's dark, but you can see the blocks are up in the corner.
Yeah, so we got our
Squash
squash blocks right there.
Yeah. And if
There
we
should
were to
be
go
another set
over
over
here, we can't see them now because they got the rim joists all sealed up. But there's probably a 99.9% probability that they had them there. They're probably going to have them over there.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. But we can get confirmation on that.
Yeah,
too.
we can even have them remove a piece of that styrofoam if we wanted to. And this one has a backup power supply, Generac. So that's why some of the propane too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can see here, because they put this piece of sheathing up for the panels, they've already put their vapor barrier in behind it, and it looks like they have their insulation in there as well.
Right. So that's just because it's electrical and it's hard to stuff it in there later.
That's right.
So they just decided to do that little section, which is fine. We probably should also mention what type of wall this is. So we're doing a frame inspection here too, but this wall really is not structural.
No, that's right. No, this is just primarily to hold the insulation and the vapor barrier and the drywall.
Yeah, and run any services that they want.
And run any services, exactly.
Yeah. So it's not a structural wall at all. Again, we want to notice about 36-inch openings. We want to know about the height of our controls, our switches. You'll notice this one of the code requirements at the framing stage is any lumber that's in contact with cement. It needs this little piece of plastic or tar paper or be pressure treated.
Yep.
In order, so this, you can see how wet it is underneath of that, right? So this doesn't get soaked and rot. Because concrete, as soon as you put something on concrete, it'll just draw it right out, the moisture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So again, we got a TGI floor system up above us here, Pat.
Yep.
So we want to make sure that there's no excessive notching and drilling in that. It doesn't
Especially
appear to be.
towards the bearing ends, right?
Yep.
And there doesn't seem to be any more than what's supposed to be there. Again, we can verify all the LVLs, the columns and the supports and the hangers and the type of joists, all from the floor system design, right?
Exactly. That should all be in the specifications.
In the specs, yeah.
Yep.
Even these folks even went to the trouble of going behind their pipes so they don't rattle,
Yeah.
right? Which is good. So that's a
Yep.
stack. So we're starting to do a little bit of plumbing while we're here.
Yep.
For the rough end, which we look at, and they even got their clean out at the base of the stack.
That's right.
What they're supposed to.
Yep. And you can see here they have a Y in here. This comes down to 45,
Right.
which allows it to flow properly down through the system.
So if that was a T, would there be a problem if that was a T?
Yes, there would. Yep.
Yeah. And
So,
what would the problem be there?
so the idea there would be that the water would come down, it would hit the backside of the pipe, and if there was any solids in that with that water, that the solids could get trapped in that
Right.
area and
Start
that's the water,
sticking and build up and block it off.
and block it off.
Right on. Right on. So there's a little bit of plumbing up in here. There's just an elbow there. It looks like for a water closet maybe.
Yep.
Or the stack going upstairs and a vent.
And we have a vent over here.
Yeah, and that's a vent there, off there. It looks all good.
Yeah.
Again, we got some creative artwork here.
Yeah, so we have another stack here going down and into the floor.
Again, they have her clean out at the base.
Yep. All their joints in their pipe are all flowing in the proper direction.
Again, the ventilation is all roughed in. I don't see where they cut any members of the floor joist system.
Yeah.
So they look pretty good shape that way. You notice this one, they didn't drill the wires through. Oh, we're in them underneath.
Yeah,
Huh?
exactly. Yeah, they may have caught their mistake on
Yeah.
their own.
Right on.
But again, like we had upstairs, we've got an LVL beam running through here with point loads coming down. That would be directly underneath the one
One up
above.
there, yeah, so they're continuous, right? So the only other thing we want to look at is the squash blocks. In this case, the LVL is acting as a squash block. If you look
Yeah.
at it, they got to extend it right out to the end. The other thing we want to look at now that we're in the basement too is the requirement for these. So them are our anchor bolts, which we probably would look at during the foundation stage too, if you recall, Kyle.
That's right.
We've seen them sticking up out of the foundation wall. So this is the reason we want to anchor the building to the foundation. And this is the way we do it. So basically the requirement is to have them on the corners, around any openings. And technically, although these are spaced about 4 feet, technically it's 7'9" where the spacing is required, which is a 1/2 inch anchor, J-bolt, 4 inches embedded. And sometimes, where this goes on the very first of the build, you can walk over to some of these, and once the building has settled, sometimes you can turn these by hand. That one you can't. But 90% of the time you go over and turn them by hand. So you just make a note to tell them to tighten them up. There's another point load, Kyle, from upstairs for a column. Where
Yep.
that, right where that, I think right around one of the tall walls.
Yeah, and we can see there the squash blocks are in place.
Again, a little more plumbing. So some of these water lines, if that water line wasn't in the middle, they would need that metal protector plate. They probably should have them on, even on the drain. This is probably a wet vent maybe, I'm not sure. No, it's probably a vent. This is the one that went all the way up, remember?
Yeah.
So that's
Yep.
just a vent, so that's not too bad. But there should be some metal protector plates over them so they don't drive a screw or nail into the pipe.
Exactly. Another good point to bring up too is that if you're in a situation where you're not sure if it's actually a drain pipe or a vent, if you look at your T's or at your 90s, if you have 90s in there, it's a good chance it's a vent. Otherwise, it would be 45s.
Yeah. So I'm gonna actually check my spec on these eye joists because what's a little bit suspicious to me is how close that 1.5 pipe is drilled to the bottom of that cord. So I'm gonna do some checking on that, see if that's acceptable. You can see what happened here. We have a regular open one and they had this running, then they had no choice but to keep going, right?
Yeah, it's very close to the bottom cord of the joist.
Yeah. We don't see a lot. We used to see a lot of them. We don't see so many of them now. We usually see these.
Yeah, it's very typical to see the
open
open web
web.
ones, either in wood like this, or
Yeah.
the ones that have the metal gussets
Yeah.
on them.
Yeah. And they always have a bearing end, and they always have an end you can cut. Right, just for field adjustments.
Exactly.
Yeah. Where these ones are solid right through, or with a piece of OSB right through them. Very good.
All right.
Well, no, I think that's just about everything, isn't it?
I think you're right.
They seem overall in pretty good shape. Let's head upstairs out of this damp basement. Well, Kyle, I think that's just about everything.
Yeah, I think we got everything covered.
Everything but the kitchen sink.
Yeah, speaking of kitchen sinks, it looks like there's going to be one right here.
Yes, sir. So, what do we see in here?
So this here is obviously a rough in for a kitchen sink in an island.
Yeah, typically, yep. So, when we see a pipe sticking up like that, so obviously there's a requirement to vent this fixture, the sink.
That's right.
So if this is an island, obviously they don't want a pipe shooting up through the countertop, going up and tying in the vents it. So what are their options to get this sink vented?
So there's a couple of options here. Typically what we would see is something called a cheater vent.
Okay.
That they'd have on that. It allows air to come in, but it won't allow anything else. It's like a one-way valve.
Okay, it's like a mechanical item that when the water drains, it opens up, let air in.
Exactly.
When it's done that, it shuts off.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Is there any other option that they could do?
Yeah, there is. They could do a circuit vent.
So all it is they'll take the same size pipe. And you notice this one's 2 inches.
Yep.
So there's a reason for that. So typically it's only 1.5 inches. So the 2 inches, they'll do a circuit, almost looks like a racetrack. They'll come back down in, and they'll make this long enough so it contains enough air that it can feed that so you don't get that siphon action. That's all it is by what they call a circuit vent. Now this one's out here, so obviously it's going to be the trapper and it's going to stub out here with the trap in it and go hook up to the sink, right?
That's right.
There could be a false wall here. If that false wall is there, and the island's kind of on this side with a little ledge or bumper side, then chances are they're going to do the circuit vent because I can put it in that wall. But if this is just a straight island, all cabinetry, they're probably going to do the cheater vent. If this was on the wall, and we talked about this a little while back, that if this was stubbed out here in the wall for a kitchen sink, of course the adaptability requirements would kick in. And now this stub out can only be no more than 12 inches center off the finished floor.
Off the finished floor, yep.
And that is the case if they ever want to lower the countertop. That's the only reason. And then they don't have to tear the wall apart to do it. So, yeah. So there.
All right.
That's everything, including
so.
the kitchen sink.
I think we're done here.
Yeah, I'm exhausted. I'm old, you're young. You go do another one, I'm done.
You can have a nap in the car.
Yeah, thanks. You drive. All right, Kyle, that finishes up our frame and roughing inspection for this property. So they're in pretty good shape. So let's just kind of recap what we did find.
Yeah, so we had a couple of squash blocks there that we want to confirm that are in place over there where there was some insulation already installed.
So they were hiding, eh? So
Exactly.
to speak.
Yeah. So we'll want to ask them, you know, if they are, you know, they're in place, confirm that.
Yep.
We got a couple of spots there where we had some drilling into structural members that we need to have confirmed that that's okay.
Right.
From the manufacturer.
And if not okay, they have to suggest some time to fix.
That's right.
Yep.
I think that was everything, Pat. I don't think we had anything else.
Yeah, I don't think there was much else there. So, like I say, they were in good shape. So let's get the report done and let's go get a cold one.
That's good.